joining today's Young Security Professionals webinar, sponsored by Interlogics, Honeywell, Access Communications, System Sensor, and Vivint. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. All callers will be muted, so please use your question and chat log to submit any questions, which will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Today's topic on how to differentiate yourself in 30 seconds or less is presented by Don Hahn and Mary Jezioro of the Security Business Institute. Some background on both speakers. Mary Jezioro is the Vice President of the Shield Security Systems Group of Companies and President of the Security Business Institute. She has over 20 years experience in corporate branding strategies. This, combined with a passion for human relations and motivating individuals to succeed, Mary is well-versed on helping develop leaders to effectively create and communicate value throughout the sales process. Don Hahn is the Vice President and Chief Training Officer of the Security Business Institute, where he provides a strategic approach to sales, business, and organizational development. Don has over 25 years of experience in sales and executive management and is a certified Franklin Covey coach. Don has also served on several boards, is past president of the Buffalo Niagara Sales and Marketing Executives, a member of the American Society for Training and Development, and the International Coaching Federation. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass this off to your presenters.
Hey Jacqueline, hey group, thanks for joining us this afternoon. I am Mary Jezioro. And can everybody see my screen? I just want to make sure that we're okay here. No. Nope, hang on. Wait. Everybody okay? Can you see my screen, Jacqueline? I just want to confirm.
Absolutely, yes, we're up and running.
Hey, sorry about that glitch. We are excited to be with you guys today. We spent a great few days down in New Orleans with young security professionals a couple weeks ago and had a lot of great discussions about a 360-degree customer experience and how we can use that philosophy to hone our sales skills and really put the customer in the center of this whole process and remove ourselves from what our product is and what we're trying to convey to really get involved with the consumer's mind and really help them understand that we understand where they're coming from. And we've put together some discussion topics for you guys today to talk about really zoning in on the customer's pain. And we really want to take just the next few minutes here and talk about why your customers even buy from you. What is it that they're looking to achieve from this whole transaction? And without further ado, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Don.
Great. Thank you, Mary. And how's everyone doing today? I hope you're, some of you are joining us in the morning, others around the 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock time frame. We're going to talk about how do you differentiate yourself in 30 seconds or less. And just a comment, you really don't have that much time to engage your client. Your client or prospect makes a decision in less than 30 seconds as to whether or not they're going to engage. And the actual amount of time on average that you have is about 7 seconds. That's it. Within 7 seconds, the person you're engaging is going to determine whether or not they want to ride along. And if you want to lose your prospect, what you have to do is focus on products, features, and benefits and try to impress them with how long your company's been around, how long you've been doing this, how large your customer base is. They simply do not care. And I hate to say that. I know you've all got some wonderful companies and you're very proud of them, but your prospects don't care about what your company is. What they care about is how you and your company can solve their problems. And so you have, as I said, about 30 seconds or less to differentiate yourself. So the question becomes, how do you do that? How do you differentiate yourself from every other person that's on that calling those folks up? And the bottom line, we're going to talk through today what will get you hung up on, okay? The trash talk and delete. We're going to look at it from a customer's perspective, what they have going on in their day when you call and interrupt them with phone call. We're going to talk about pain, which is what really matters, and pain is what you do to solve your customers' and your prospects' problems. And then we're finally follow up and talk about the 30-second commercial and how you can gain endorsement from your customer in 30 seconds or less. And then finally, we're going to talk about where and when you use this process. So as we move on here, let's talk about why people buy. And this was a study that was done by the Gallup poll several years ago. And they asked buyers why it is that you do business with your vendor. And this is what was stated in this survey. The purchasers said, nobody understands my business better. Other things cited were, I see her as an extension of my company. She clearly puts my needs first. He makes me feel like I'm his only customer. And I want you to look at this slide. Nowhere on this slide is the word price. People do not buy from you because of your price. They buy from you because of the problems you solve for them. And so today we're going to take a look at how can we differentiate ourselves very quickly. So let's talk about why it is, what it is that customers buy when they buy a relationship with someone. And in priority order, this is why they're buying. Number one, they're buying the best salesperson, the person who builds the best rapport with them, the person that understands and solves their problems. They're buying the product or service you have to offer, but that's only after they buy you. And they're also buying the company and the reputation and how you apply your products to the customer's problems. That's the sequence in which they buy. So let's look at what happens in the life of Paul Prospect. Understand that when someone comes into work, it's noon, they've been working for 4 hours, and they probably haven't even gotten to the first item on their to-do list. But if you're selling commercial or residential, you're juggling emails, voicemails, the kids, the family, your schedule, work, you get interruptions, you're putting out fires, and they're also taking calls from your competitors. Then you dial the phone, and you ring in, and understand that you're an unwelcome interruption. They're not sitting at their desk. They're not sitting at home hoping that you call. It just doesn't happen. And so you've got to tune into them. You've got to tune into what's in it for me and approach the call with the perspective of the prospect. And they have two basic fears when you call. And I don't know if you've ever reviewed this or thought about it, but the primary fear, the number one fear that they have, is that you'll waste their time. Why? Because everybody else has wasted their time. They talk on incessantly about their products and services and don't really get to the problem that the customer or prospective customer has, and then they disengage. The other fear that a prospect has, whether it's residential or commercial, they're fearful that they will be manipulated. They do not want to be coerced into buying something that really doesn't fit their needs. So the question is, how do we resolve this? This is a very difficult dilemma, and the only way you can resolve it is by talking to them about what's important to them. So we have something we call a 30-second commercial that in 30 seconds will convey who you are and why you're different. So we have a poll we'd like to do here, and the poll is, I want to ask you, do you have a scripted, memorized 30-second commercial? I'll turn it over to Jackie on this. Okay, you can see the polling there. So please answer the question, yes or no. If you have a scripted, memorized 30-second commercial, one that you know, without thinking, you can just state it and it hits the customer's pains and what their needs are. So please take a minute and click yes or no.
Okay, it looks like it's a pretty even split almost. 46 of the callers, yes, they do have a scripted commercial. 54% said no, and that's 100% who voted.
Great.
So,
thank you for that. And you know, Jacqueline, that's not much different than what we see. Only about 50% of the people really have a scripted conversation, and you don't want it to sound scripted, but you really have to approach the prospect in a way that they're unfamiliar with, in a way that's uncommon, that's going to differentiate you. Because if you don't, then you're going to be relegated to every other person that's calling them. So what I'd like you to do, 46% of you do have a 30-second memorized commercial, and 54 don't. So my question to you, if you would, if I can turn this. Jackie, can you turn the computer back?
you guys should have control of the screen.
Okay.
The polling's been closed.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. All right, so your elevator pitch. I want you to assume that you step in an elevator and all of a sudden you hit the floor number 30 and someone stops the elevator, jumps in, and pushes floor number 31. And you look over and you notice their picture from the paper, and they're the largest prospective client you have. You have 30 seconds to tell them why they should do business with you. So I want you to just take a moment and jot down the key elements of your elevator pitch. So please take a minute, write down what it is you'll say to them to convince them that you deserve their business. Please take a minute. You should have some music on hold. Maybe I'll do some singing here, Jackie.
Go ahead, Don. That'd be great.
No, you really don't want to hear me sing. I've got a great face for radio, though.
Quite the dancer, though, I understand.
I can hold my own. Okay, hopefully everybody's had a chance to write it down at their desk there as you're thinking through this. And now what I'd like you to do is take a minute and review it. Look over that. And is it a compelling proposition? I want you to have this out-of-body experience and put yourself in your prospect's shoes. Okay, is this compelling? So as you review this elevator pitch that you wrote down, a couple of questions. Okay, how many times are you referring to your company's attributes? How long your company's been in business, how good you are, the size of your customer base, the accomplishments the company has. That's the first thing I want you to look at. Second question is, how many times do you refer to products and services of your organization, your company? So you're talking about attributes of the company, you're talking about products of the company, and then the final question is, how many times are you referring to the prospect's pain? And pain is that which you do to solve their problems. Pain is a very difficult thing to define, but it's critical that we be able to identify what their pain is, because that's the basis of the business relationship. And so make sure that most of your engagement in your elevator speech is about the prospect's pain. So we're going to talk about how do you keep the prospect's attention. And the question is, when you're making a call, and you've all been on the receiving end of a bad sales call where the salesperson's talking quick, doesn't come up for air, doesn't engage the prospect or doesn't engage you, and they're trying to control that call, and they're doing it by just talking. And the real question is, who's really controlling the sales call? If they're talking and you are on the receiving end and you ask one question that they can't answer, then it's over. So the call is controlled by the person asking the question. You have to understand that the person in control is the person asking the question. The person who monopolizes the conversation is not selling, they're simply telling. And the person most motivated to continue that conversation is the salesperson. The person most motivated to end it is the person that's being talked at. So again, we've got to start with the end in mind, which is what are the problems? So in the buying transaction, you have to understand that it's an emotional decision. Everything that you have bought in your life primarily has emanated from an emotional requirement, something you really were emotionally involved in. Then you justified it intellectually. The house, the car you bought, that's an emotional decision. And you justify it by saying we can cut back on this, or we can stop doing this. We can go out one day a week versus 2 days a week. We'll cut down on where we go. So you justify it and you back in because you emotionally want it. And no one's different. It's all the same, but it's all about their perspective. So you have to look at it from the prospect's perspective. And this is a long way to get to how do we get to pain. And pain is the absolute greatest driver in human beings. This cartoon depicts it. Now, you can get $200 a cup for lemonade in the desert. You can't get $200 a cup on the street corner, and the real difference is the motivation. Somebody's not motivated to buy that cup if they're driving in a Mercedes and pull over and buy a cup of lemonade for $200. But if you're in the desert and you haven't had a drink in 3 days, you're going to pay anything for that lemonade. So you will not make a sale unless pain's established. That's the premise we go off of. So bottom line, people really fundamentally respond to two stimuli, pleasure and pain. And pain is more motivating than pleasure. People are very motivated to escape pain. Some people are very motivated to pleasure, but the absolute most motivating emotion is pain. So as a backdrop, understand that, as I said, without pain, there won't be a sale. So let's get to what the pains are. And the question that I have for you is, I want you to consider for a moment the top 3 problems that you solve for your customers. Now, you may have certain problems you solve for the residential, and you may have certain problems you solve for the commercial side of your business. So the pains, you may have to have 2 sets of pains. But the bottom line is you need to have 3 problems that you solve, business issues or personal issues, and it has nothing to do with a camera, an alarm. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what is derived from having those. So I want you to take a minute and write down the top 3 problems that you solve for your very best customers. Think of your current customer base. Now reflect on the business issues or the underlying personal issues that are solved by your products and services. Take a minute and write those down, please. And there is a method to this madness because we're starting with the pain part. All right, hopefully you've had a chance to write those down. Let's go to the next slide. And hopefully you've written down something similar to this for residential or commercial. What's really derived from using your products is, okay, they get an alarm system, but they really get peace of mind, both at home and work. That's the pain you're solving. That's the pleasure you're trying to reach. Fire and theft protection. You're protecting the most valuable assets they have, whether it be their children or their intellectual property. That's what you're doing. Okay? But don't talk about the alarm system. Talk about what's derived from its use. Employee tracking, reducing the shrinkage that goes out the back door. Simple administration. Okay? Lack of confidence in their current provider. If they're not certain the alarm is going to work when it should, why do they have it? Unreliable service, lack of service, no personal connection. These are the things that you're really selling to someone. Okay? They're tired of the complicated technology. They want simplicity. So your pains should be something such as that. It should be one of those types of items. So let's talk about the 30-second commercial. We're going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about the pain and how you use it in the 30-second commercial. And then we're going to talk about the fact that features and benefits really do not represent you as well as understanding the prospect's perspective and getting their pain. So let's talk about building your 30-second commercial. There are really 4 primary segments, pieces you want to go through. And my experience is we try to get too flowery when in fact it's a very pragmatic, straightforward solution. The first thing you want to do is introduce yourself. And then the second element of a 30-second commercial is the pain statement. What it is you do to solve your problems. We're going to talk about how to get that prospect emotionally involved. Well, to do that, we use something called FUMICIDE. Okay, it's an acronym which we'll learn about in a little bit, which are emotional statements. And then finally is get your prospect involved. I think the biggest problem that people have in their introduction to clients is they do not engage the prospect. They're afraid to engage the prospect because they fear if the prospect speaks, the call will end. And in our opinion, that's when the call starts. You want your prospect engaged. The hook question does it. So let's walk through these things. The introduction. Now, when you're prospecting, your challenge is that in less than a minute, you want to get your message across. You want to get the prospect's attention in less than a minute, but you don't want to sound like every other salesperson. So differentiate yourself. You're an interruption, make it a good interruption. So the introduction should be about, maybe about 25 words. That's it. Who you are and why you're calling. Don't make it this long litany of flowery stuff. It's simply Don Hahn from Security Business Institute. Okay. Next piece is your pain statement. Now, take the top 3 problems that you stated previously that you solve for your customers and list those. And the reason we use 3, we don't use 2, we don't use 4, because human beings can only look at primarily 3 things at a time. If you give them 2 pains, chances of really hitting one of them is reduced by 33%. So you want to give them 3 because that's what they can deal with in a very succinct way. And chances are very good that if you've done your homework and you've thought real hard about these pains, these folks that you're on the phone with will look at it and say, my God, this person understands my business like nobody else. This is very much like Socrates. Socrates was considered wise not because of what he said, but the questions he asked. So using the Socratic method, you want to appear extremely wise, knowledgeable, and differentiate yourself so that prospect says, this person really understands my business. So identify those top 3 and plug them in. The next piece is create an emotional link. And you remember we talked about buying decisions are made emotionally. They're only justified intellectually. So you want that prospect immediately engaged emotionally. You want them very involved on an emotional basis. So we use what we call FUMICIDE. And it's an acronym. It stands for, you want your prospect, You're going to flower your 30-second commercial with statements such as frustrated. I deal with people who are frustrated with not having the peace of mind when the children come home that they're going to be safe in the house and that we'll know they've gotten there. I deal with people who are upset by the fact that the shrinkage going out the back door is too much, affecting their margins too much. You have people that are uncertain, they're mad, afraid, concerned, irritated, or disturbed. That spells fumicide. And you want people that are emotionally engaged. Therefore, we insert these adjectives which are highly emotional and gets the prospect to think way beyond the intellectual. We insert these ahead of the pains. So if you have a good introduction, you've got some good emotional links in the pain, next question is, how do I get them engaged? And you get them engaged, we call it an open probe. Many of you know what an open probe is, but it's simply turning to them and inviting a free flow response. Which of these are an issue for you? That's an open probe. It gets them engaged. It gets them to the point where they're really thinking about how you can solve their problem. But an open probe will invite a free flow response. It'll minimize the opportunity for a yes-no answer. And it gets the prospect engaged, which is really what you want. Because once a prospect's engaged, you can engage in a dialogue and you can solve their problems. On the other hand, a closed probe is going to give you a yes or no response. If your hook question back to the customer is, are any of these an issue for you? You have a 50-50 shot. They're going to say yes or they're going to say no. And they won't be engaging, and the chances of you building endorsement are low. So we quickly went through the 4 aspects. Let's put it all together here. If you look at this slide, this is what your 30-second commercial should look like. An introduction. Hi, I'm so-and-so from XYZ company. I deal with companies like yours. Companies who are frustrated with these 3 pains. They're frustrated with the lack of attention they get from their security dealer. They're concerned that their alarms are out of state. They don't know who's answering the phone. They don't even know if the people care. And they're also frustrated by the fact that they're not getting timely responses to their questions. They're not getting the reviews that they need. They're not getting answers to the question. And the hook is, which of these are an issue for you? So just to summarize, let me give you my 30-second commercial. Don Hahn from Security Business Institute. We're a training and development company. We deal with security dealers like yourself, people that are frustrated with the time and energy it takes to manage their accounts. We also deal with people who are uncertain with the succession plan of their business, and they're also frustrated with the fact that they really aren't moving the ball forward in sales, but they want to grow it. Which of these are an issue for you? That's an example of a 30-second commercial. And I would encourage you for a moment now to just think through those and try to pull it together. And it's awkward at first, I'm certain. But you're going to find that if you, once you own this, you're talking to the prospect, those pains are what's important to them. Fumicide is what gets them emotionally engaged. So that said, how do we know we had an effective 30-second commercial? If you look at the bottom here, here's the question, okay? Here's your introduction, no more than 10 words. The pain statement is the top problems you solve, and the hook question gets them engaged. And here's how you build it down at the bottom. Enter the 3 major pains, craft an emotional connection, write that introduction, and then write the 30-second commercial in the proper sequence. Once you do that, here's what you got to answer. Does the phrasing flow? Does it flow or does it sound scripted? And at first it'll sound scripted. Does it have the three components, the introductory, the summary, the benefit, and then finally the hook question? Is it less than a minute? And is it engaging? Does it really address the prospect from their viewpoint? Or is it all about you? So again, this is probably one of the most critical steps in the sales process. And you want to build endorsements, and that old adage that the initial impression is a lasting impression, it's nowhere is it truer than with a 30-second commercial. So the final piece is, how do you apply this 30-second commercial? And when do you apply it? And the point is the 30-second commercial should be applied every single time that you engage a prospect. Every time. Whether it's during a networking event, or you're doing cold calls, or you're doing face-to-face knock on doors, or you're doing the second call and the demo and the presentation. Every single time you engage the prospect, you have to restate your 30-second commercial, because that restates the value proposition that you have. This is your value. And slide I'd like to, this is the third last slide, but you really have to look at, if you're losing on price, it's because you aren't establishing value. Value is a really complex equation. It's a combination of price times performance over a period of time. How reliable is your service? What happens if there's a problem? What happens if there's a false alarm? What if they need additional help? That's why they buy. They don't buy because your system is 10 percentage points lower than your competition. The only time they'll do that is if you have not established value. And the time to establish value is from the first minute you talk to someone. And the best way to do that is to sell to them in a manner consistent with how they want to be sold to, and they all want a problem solved. So with that, SBI provides security dealers with a competitive edge. Usually we deal with business owners like yourself, people that want to sustain revenue growth. They want to streamline operations. They want to maximize human capital. They want to improve work-life balance. Those are the issues that we solve for the people that we deal with. So I guess what we'd like to do now, Jackie, is do another poll, and we'd like to ask you, what are your top 3 challenges that you're faced with out of the 5 that you see there? So take a minute and go to the poll. And answer those questions. Jackie, are they polling? Are you polling?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still climbing, so I'm giving it just a couple more minutes or a couple more seconds.
Sure, thank you.
And then we'd like to open it up for some questions with regard to the 30-second commercial specifically, if anybody has any.
If you dialed in late, all callers are muted, so please use your question log or your chat log to submit those. Okay, the polling results are in. 50% say sales, 58% say operational efficiencies, 33% say personnel, 58% say recruiting and hiring, and 25% say customer service.
Okay. All right, great. Now, this last part that we took you through is really the basis of 30-second commercial. It's identifying the top challenges that clients have. And we pretty much knew that one of these would be the top 3. So with that, we'd like to open it up to any questions. It's been difficult, I know, just listening in. But what questions do you have? If you want to post them, we'll be happy to address them, but this is a very underutilized tool as we've seen it by salespeople.
Don, Mary, I've got a couple questions that have come in.
Okay.
When it comes to training my sales team, what are your thoughts on presenting my company's 30-second commercial to them for them to memorize, or allowing them to develop their own?
Great question. Great question. The 30-second commercial has got to be owned by the individual saying it. You do not want robots. You don't want to tell your people what the 30-second commercial is. And the real value is have them create it, because creating it gives them a sense of ownership about it. And they've got to be comfortable. They have to be able to interpret the value of the company in 30 seconds or less. You can't tell them how to do that. So whoever's asked that question is a great one. But let them develop it. Let them struggle and determine those pains.
Okay, we've got a few more. We have various product lines and need to cover needs for both residential and commercial clients. When I first meet a potential customer and haven't yet learned what their need is, how do I know which pains to cover with my commercial?
Well, that's a good question as well. First of all, you will know if they're residential or commercial. Okay, when you speak to them, you know they're residential or commercial. So I would suggest what you do is you start with looking at your current customer base. Query your customer base and look at your residential customers. Make some calls and ask them, why is it you've been with us for 7 years? Why is it you do business with us? Aside from everything else, just tell us why you do business. And you'll hear them say things like, you know, you really care, you go the extra yard. It's not about the price. You got to respond very quickly. I know that I have the peace of mind. So you're going to hear this from your own clients. And if that's the product and services you sell, don't you want to find other people that have those needs? So the goal is to start with your current base, whether it may be residential and it may be commercial. You get the top pains that are generally there, and when you're calling on that prospect, whether they're residential or they're commercial, that's what you address. You address the needs from their perspective.
Okay, next question. Can you please go over what fumicide stands for again?
Sure. Fumicide, F-U-M-A-C-I-D. And that is frustrated, upset, uncertain, mad, angry, concerned, irritated, and disturbed.
Okay. Now this question, what about incoming calls to our office? We have many referrals for inquiries. I think that's asking a question if it's suggested to use your commercial for incoming calls.
Absolutely. Every time the person calls, if they're calling, simple question, if they're calling you, that's a lot easier than you trying to make the outbound call. But the question becomes, you know, what is it that I can help you with today? And if you start with that premise, they will tell you exactly what their issues are, but your line of questioning should get to these needs. They're going to call you and say, I need an alarm system. Well, why do you need it? That's how you get it. Your line of questioning will discern what's really important to them, because when people come to you, they've already made a decision and transferred it intellectually that they need an alarm system. So now they're in an intellectual process and they're shopping for price. Good news is they're shopping and they're open. Bad news is they're probably at the price level. So you've got to get them back to the pain, and don't respond to the initial thing as, you know, I have a need for an alarm. Okay, how big, how much square footage you have, how many rooms, blah, blah, blah. Don't get to that. Get to why do you think you need one? What's wrong with what you're doing today? So what you want to get to is the why that they want it, not the what that they want. So if you have people taking the calls, they should be trained on asking that question behind the question that gets them to go deeper and discern what the real pain is that motivated them to call.
Okay, and last question. In order to be provocative to senior decision makers, don't you recommend a more lasered, focused, targeted value based upon what you see of a challenge for them instead of the laundry list of values?
You know, that's an interesting point. I really don't think so, because that's too presumptive. You really don't know the first time you call on a prospect what their problems are. I mean, it's impossible for you to know that. And the second thing is, it's not important even when you know what it is. I would suggest that when you walk into a business, you'll spend a few moments and you'll know exactly the system they need and what it'll do for them. That's not important. It's important that they understand they need this system because of this, and this is what it'll do for them. So the only way you get there is with questioning. So if you go in assuming you know the needs, chances are very good that you may be on the dartboard, but you're going to miss the bullseye. So I suggest you go in with the 3 top things that generally are problems. Turn it over that with the hook. Tell me about your problems, and believe me, they will. And then you just listen, you take notes, then you present your solutions after you identified and confirmed what the pains are. Are there any other questions?
That's it. That's it for questions. Thank you, Don.
We want to thank you, and you know, if you look at the screen, if you want to receive this template, because doing it over the phone like this is difficult, but if you want to have your own template to develop the 30-second commercial, email Mary at securitybusinessinstitute.com.
Thanks, guys. Yes, I'd also like to thank all the callers for taking the time to join us. Once again, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the webinar, Neurologics, Honeywell, Access Communications, System Sensor, and Vivint. And just so all the callers know, a recording of today's webinar will be available online, located on the YSP group page at www.esaweb.org. Also, be sure to register for next week's webinar on Tuesday, December 13th. Security Business Institute will again join us to share proven methods for hiring sales superstars. Registration for the next week's webinar can also be found on the ESA website, more specifically the events calendar. Again, our web address is www.esaweb.org. If there are no other questions, then thank you so much. I'll leave the slide up with the contact information for a couple more minutes and let everyone get back to their day. Thank you again.
Thanks, Jacqueline.